So today we've got Kevin Beauchamp, who's going to be our presenter. He's got his master's of arts in counseling from Providence College, and he's also one of our mental skills coaches here in the center. So he's going to be talking today about growth mindset. So I'm just going to kind of let him go at it. And here's Kevin.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for being here and for giving me the opportunity to sort of share something that just in the last couple of years I've found really interesting for myself personally, and even in my work professionally, working with clients. So as Jeff said, just give me a sec here. They're having some technology issues, so it's not a problem. So yeah, as Jeff was saying, my name's Kevin Beauchamp. I work primarily on the side as a counselor in Port of the Prairie. So I've been working in the mental health field for about 5 or 6 years now, and really this approach, working with growth mindsets, has really come from just kind of my experience working with clients there, and I'll explain a bit more in detail sort of how I came to sort of utilize this approach. Obviously, I didn't develop this approach. The growth mindset was developed by a researcher named Carol Dweck, who was studying children and just studying individuals and really trying to see how people approach challenges and the different perspectives that people had as they were faced with various challenges. And what she found over the years of research was really what became known as the growth mindsets. So just to sort of break down the evening and give you sort of a sense of what we're going to be talking about tonight, or what I'm going to be talking about. For starters, I want to share a little bit about my story and my background within sport. And I wanted to share in the previous slide that my experience is actually fairly limited in terms of organized sport. I started as a young kid in baseball, and I'll explain how that was sort of short-lived. But really now, my interest is kind of in endurance sports, so primarily triathlon and running. So that's just a little background, or a little tidbit about me. I really enjoy sort of the endurance training. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about my story, why it matters, why it matters that we talk about mindsets, why I think it's relevant to work from this approach of growth mindsets when we're working with athletes, and even for our own performance. The importance of mindsets, then we'll dive into the growth mindset, what it is, and compare it and contrast it with what's called a fixed mindset, which is kind of the opposite. I'm going to dive in a little bit to how the growth mindset shapes your brain. Obviously, that's not my expertise, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's a heavy topic, but we're going to look at how there's an actual impact neurologically when we're talking about the growth mindset. And then to finish off, we're just going to talk about how to cultivate the growth mindset in our day-to-day lives, in athletics, and how it can, how as athletes, we can approach the growth mindset and utilize it in sport, but also as parents and as coaches, how you can utilize the growth mindset to help your children or help your athletes perform well. So a little bit about my background in sport. So that's not me, obviously, but although I probably did kind of look like that at that age, similar features. But yeah, so kind of around the age of, I think, 8 or 9, I don't know the exact timing, but my parents got me into baseball. I had wanted to get into hockey, but come from a bigger family, so just in terms of cost, time, commitment, it just wasn't an option. So it was good. So the first option was soccer, but then it ended up last minute I was put into baseball. So not a whole lot of choice there, but that's just sort of where I went. In terms of how I was coming into my experience with sport, really, these were some of the ways looking back now that I would sort of describe myself at that time. Really coming into it with kind of a low self-esteem, poor self-image, and self-worth at that time. And really having, just not having adequate support in my experience with athletics, which kind of resulted in a sense of, a lack of understanding of what it takes to perform well. I was kind of left to my own devices as a young child to sort of figure out what does that look like. And it all sort of culminated in having inadequate mental skills, as we call them. Right? I just wasn't equipped to perform well. So what that kind of looked like in sort of practice was that I was often, I often avoided challenges. Going to practice was sort of optional for me, right? It was sort of like I was responsible for getting myself there. Sorry about that. And so quite often I just wouldn't go. Performance for me was this idea that it's just really about talent, right? And so at the time I just happened to be bigger than most of my other peers, just developmentally. I guess I was just a little bigger, I was a little stronger. So early on, that was my advantage, and I enjoyed sport because I did well. However, as time went on, and I didn't really engage in sort of the practices and behaviors that I needed in order to perform well and to continue developing in the sport, some of my other peers, as they caught up to me, started to pass me, right, in terms of performance. And so I was left kind of feeling frustrated, not knowing what to do. And really, it was kind of like last year, I think it was probably around age 12. So right around that puberty stage where I can just remember time and time again getting up to bat. And it's like all of a sudden this year, like the balls were coming a lot faster and I had no way of hitting them. So I just kept striking out over and over. So, and I remember just the sense of feeling just discouraged and frustrated with my experience. And what it unfortunately ended up in or resulted in was me just leaving sport. Me taking that experience with the mindset that I was bringing to that experience of, I guess I just don't have it, right? I guess I'm just not talented. I guess I just am not, sport's not for me, right? I'm not good at it. Not realizing that maybe there's these other factors and other variables that are going on that could have helped me perform well. And so I think that the reason I share that story is because I really think looking back now, what I know about certain mindsets and how we approach experiences and how much of a role that plays and how we go through certain experiences, I realized that my particular mindset at that time kind of set me up for failure, right? And set me up to end up leaving sport. And I dabbled a little bit in track in high school, but it was sort of the same thing where I just, I remember, I'm ashamed to say this, but I remember showing up to a track meet at one point in like baggy jeans, right? And like just feeling like I didn't need to do what it takes to sort of perform well. And so that was another example or another reinforcing experience for me where I guess I just don't have it. So I guess the end point that I think is really important and sort of the underlying approach that I've taken is that our beliefs always influence our performance. And this really comes from again, it comes from my experience working with clients in the counseling setting, but really just experiencing it as, when a client comes and they're bringing certain challenges or certain issues that they're struggling with, and not knowing, what to do about, the anxiety they're experiencing in the exam, or just the anxiety they experience when they, have to perform, whether it's competition or whatever it is. And we'd often spend time working on, okay, let's work on these skills, or let's work on these, let's change these behaviors, or let's change, how you think about this, right? And that can certainly be beneficial, and there's certainly a place for that. But what I often found was that as we continued to work together over a period of time, that there was often more to those behaviors or the end result that they were struggling, that we were constantly sort of coming up against a way that they thought about things, or this belief that they had about themselves, that if we could just sort of adjust that, if we could adjust that belief, or we could adjust that mindset, then some of that other stuff, the peripheral stuff, or the issues that they were sort of bringing, would kind of just take care of themselves. So an example of this is around the idea of making a mistake, right? So, when we're talking about performance and just having, intense anxiety around, performing, whether it's in competition, and just feeling like, really uncomfortable going into that setting. When we ask questions around like, okay, well, what are your beliefs around mistakes, right? Often it's this idea of like, well, mistakes are bad, right? We get that. Most of us kind of have that idea of like, mistakes are bad, we want to avoid them. But the thing is, again, our beliefs always influence our performance. So when we look at the belief mistakes are bad, it tended to lead to certain behaviors or certain consequences, like don't go first, right? Or the belief that if I make a mistake, well, I guess I'm not good at this then, because mistakes are bad, and so I made a mistake. I guess this, maybe this is not for me, right? It also leads to not taking risks, right? And even comparing ourselves to other people, right? So, looking when we're making mistakes and they're not, oh, well, they're obviously better than me, right? And so what it ends up leading to is a limited opportunity to learn. Because what we know about mistakes is that really, when we're talking about performance and we're talking about growth, right, mistakes are inevitable and even essential, right? They're fertile soil, if you want to put it that way, to allow us to learn from that experience and take that step towards growth. So on the flip side, if we look at it that way and our mindset around mistakes is that they're necessary, it leads to more of a motivation to try, right? To take that risk, because in taking that risk, I'm potentially taking that step closer to, my goals. I'm taking that step to performance. It leads to a sense of I can learn, right? I can learn from my mistakes. And then also in terms of that comparison piece, seeing it from the perspective of we all make mistakes, right? So when I make a mistake, it's not so devastating, because there's this mindset we have about it where, well, it's inevitable, right? Like he or she got to that place and didn't get there without making mistakes, right? So when I make mistakes, it's not so devastating. And this leads to an increased opportunity for learning. So when I'm talking about mindset, I've used that word a few times, and I've talked about mindsets and beliefs and kind of used them interchangeably. So what exactly am I meaning when I talk about a mindset? Really, a good analogy would be to sort of talk about sunglasses, right? Because when we have a pair of sunglasses, right, I think the lenses are tinted, and when you put them on, you still see everything in front of you, see the objects in front of you. But depending on the type of sunglasses that you wear, right, the color is different, right? Maybe you have glasses that are polarized, right? So it filters certain things, right? And it really causes us to perceive our environment differently. And a mindset is similar, right? So coming into this room, right, and seeing, okay, seeing, oh, like so-and-so is here, or seeing me, right? There's certain perceptions or certain beliefs and kind of thoughts that come into your head immediately, right? You're kind of making sense of the environment. And that can either set you up, depending on what your mindset is. It can set you up to learn, right? So if you come in and like, oh yeah, I'm excited to be here, this is gonna be great, I'm gonna get one or two things to sort of help me in my performance journey, then odds are that's gonna sort of help you to reach that goal. Likewise, if you come in, it's like, I don't want to be here, this is a waste of time, I don't like the looks of this guy, right? That could just as easily lead to the opposite effect of causing you to check out, not be present, and not get anything from the experience, right? So just like you can have good quality glasses, you can have good quality mindsets that sort of help and promote growth, and you can also have cheap, poor quality mindsets that set you up, right, and set you up for failure, and kind of work as a barrier towards your growth journey. I remember I thought I had found a good deal when I purchased a pair of sunglasses that were like $15, and they looked good. I thought they were cool, but I found when I put them on when I was driving, they had the effect of they block some of the sunlight out. They also tended to block out everything, right? It was sort of harder to see everything, and I just felt like my eyes were working, and it was like I was in a dark environment. So it was just like, this is not helpful. And I also remember the first time I put on like good quality sunglasses that were polarized. They weren't mine, unfortunately, they were friends. But I can just remember the experience of like, oh my goodness, like as I put them on that sunny day, my eyes just like, I could feel them just relaxing, right? And I think that's sort of that's a really good analogy when we're talking about our mindsets, because the right mindset can sort of, ease that process and help us go through the steps that we need to go through in order to perform well, in order to grow, whereas the wrong mindset can just take us out. So there's a lot of challenges that athletes face, and again, the mindset that they bring is going to really impact how they cope and deal with those challenges. So you got things like motivation, confidence, dealing with pressure, whether that's pressure from peers or coach or parents, the anxiety that comes from, being in competition, performing in front of people, failure, dealing with something like injury, criticism, and even just life stress, right? We're not just, although we're approaching this and talking about sport and athletics, there's also a whole other environment that athletes are bringing to sport. They're dealing with, could be stressors at home, could be stressors in school or in their peer relationships. And all of that has to sort of be considered too. And so what they're bringing is either going to help them in that process, or it's going to it's going to create more challenges. And so if that's you, right? If you're struggling with things, the positive or the upside is that you're not alone in that. And I think there's sort of it has this normalizing effect that feels good when we know, okay, I'm not alone in this, right? Because quite often when we're dealing with these issues, I often find that clients have this sense of like, I shouldn't be struggling with this, right? I shouldn't be, like, when I see this person perform or when I see this person doing what they do, it just looks so easy, right? And yet for me, I'm struggling with all this stuff inside. I'm struggling with this self-talk, with this anxiety, and there's this sense that they're alone in that. And so I think just to sort of acknowledge the fact, like, no, you're not alone, right? Like everyone who has, gotten to a high level of performance, even they struggle with this stuff, right? The difference is hopefully that, and most likely that they've learned how to do that well, right? And that has helped them get to that level of performance. So why focus on mindsets? If it's not already sort of clear, right? We could spend a lot of time, like I was saying, we could spend a lot of time just talking about, confidence, dealing with failure, motivation, concentration, and we do. And I think that we should, and I think there's a lot of value to addressing these specific topics within sport. However, again, if we're just focusing on that stuff and we're not looking at what's underneath that, what's the foundation that we're building those skills on, then we're going to be constantly coming up against something that makes those skills more difficult. And I really believe that what our mindset is in approaching those skills makes a huge difference. And so the mindset is sort of like the foundation that we lay to add skills on top of. So mindsets really have the capacity to fuel or sabotage performance. And I think that's sort of the key point that I want to make is that the right mindset, it can give you the tools to approach the challenges that you're facing, the inevitable challenges that you're going to have to face if you want to perform well. They can give you the tools to do that well and to go through that, or your mindset can sort of sabotage performance, like it did for me, right? And that's why I share that story. It kind of sabotaged my experience with sport, right? Thinking that I just didn't have it, right? It caused me to sort of just, okay, well, I'm just gonna quit. Instead of realizing, no, like if you want to be good, you got to put the effort in, right? You got to practice, you got to put that time in if it's an important goal to you, right? And so that sort of sabotaged it for me. Fortunately, I didn't realize that until, I was an adult, but better late than never. So I want to test your mindset on a few different ideas here, because these are things that come up regularly, and we often have sort of strong beliefs around some of this stuff. So I'm not going to ask you to share what you think about these things or what comes up, but I'm going to give you a couple seconds to just sort of process for yourself, like what's coming up, what's your belief, or what's your mindset around some of these words. So for starters, let's failure. So what are some of the thoughts or feelings? How do you feel about it? That come up when you think of the word failure. Is it good? Is it bad? Maybe to be avoided at all costs?
Well, I don't think it's fake, but you got to learn from it.
Right.
You
Okay.
go on,
So learn from it.
Yeah, not using it to build or to grow. That's the failure.
Okay.
If you can't grab it and take it.
Yeah, and that speaks to your mindset about it, right? So you have you've learned to view it as sort of use it, right? Okay. talent, right? There's a lot of talk about talent, right? So, simply, is it important? Is it not important at all? Is it everything, right? So what are some of the things that come up for you there? Is it the number one indicator of success? Is that what it's about? And not that one. Likewise, success. What does that mean to you, right? What comes up in success? Here's a good one, asking for help, right? So this is one of those ones I think that it sort of highlights the fact that we might know what to say or how to think about something like asking for help. So if I ask you like, oh, what do you think about asking for help? Oh yeah, no problem. Like, everybody needs to ask for help. It's important that, you get the right advice or great feedback from people. But then if I were to ask, okay, well, when was the last time you asked for help? Right? There's sometimes this disconnect between, okay, I know I need to ask for help, but there's something in me that actually when I'm in a place of needing help or needing support, I don't do it. Right now, that's for other people, right? I'm just gonna struggle through this, and that's where we see that disconnect, I think, between, okay, I think something, but really underneath that there might be something more, right? That mindset there around asking for help needs to be checked out, right? And that goes for some of these other concepts as well. So again, what comes up when you think about like effort or working hard, right? Again, we kind of know, okay, well, it's a given, right? In order to perform, we need to work hard, we need to put in the work. But what happens when we're doing something that maybe we think we should be pretty good at, but it turns out it's really hard, right? And what are the thoughts that come up for us in that moment? And are we as okay with the idea of like, this is really hard for me? Or do we sort of think like, no, I shouldn't be struggling like with this, right? This should be easy, right? Like, what's wrong with me? That can be an indicator of, okay, what's your mindset around that? So that's just some food for thought, I guess, to think about some of these words and just to see, okay, what is my mindset around that? So let's get into what exactly a growth mindset is. So that to be compared, a good comparison for a growth mindset is the fixed mindset. So Carol Dweck talks about the fixed mindset as sort of being kind of the limiter of opportunity. So the fixed mindset, the definition of this, is the belief that our intelligence or abilities are fixed and unchanging, meaning kind of you either have it or you don't, right? So that was kind of where I was coming from as a young athlete, right? It's sort of, you're either good or you're not. And what she's found is that people with a fixed mindset, or when we have the fixed mindset, it tends to create a barrier, right? It sort of has this sense of like, oh, I'm not good at it. And there's like this finality to that, right? I'm not good at it, so I might as well not do it, right? And it tends to lead to giving up or avoiding challenges. And we're going to look at a bit more of the consequences of a fixed mindset later on. But for now, it just creates this barrier for potential growth. Whereas the growth mindset, she described as the power of not yet. So you take the phrase, I'm not good at whatever, fill in the blank, right? And simply add the word not yet to that. It creates this whole realm of opportunity where, okay, I'm not good at that yet, meaning I could potentially be good at that at some point. So the growth mindset she defines as the belief that our intelligence and abilities are moldable. So with effort and perseverance, you can work towards that goal. And it's really about the process. So the shift in thinking, or the shift in focus, becomes not so much about talent as the key indicator of success, right? It's still an important variable, right? An important factor in performance. However, it's not the the only indicator of success. Really, it's about the process, right? The things that we put into that journey as we're, as we're performing, as we're growing. So talking about like effort, effort, perseverance, putting in the time, practice, deliberate practice, process. So when she talks about the mindset in her book, she quotes, I'm not sure who she quotes, but it says, did I win? Did I lose? Those are the wrong questions. The correct question is, did I make my best effort? If so, he says, you may be outscored, but you will never lose. Right? So again, it's this idea that it's not so much about whether you won or you lost, right? But really, it's about what you put into that. And that was something I always sort of struggled with or was challenged with whenever I watched sort of like a professional athlete, perform in a race or something, and they didn't win. And so naturally my inclination was like, oh, that's too bad. That sucks, right? They must be really discouraged. And maybe there was some discouragement there that they didn't. I mean, they're obviously looking to perform as best as possible and win, right? There's no doubt about that. But there'd be times where you hear in sort of like a post-race interview or something like that, where it's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm disappointed I didn't win, but I left everything out there, right? Like I really put in my best effort, and I'm really thankful. I'm really happy with my effort, right? And it's just so like, oh man, how do you do that, right? Like how do you focus on just like the fact that I left everything on the field, or I put everything out there, and that in itself is success, right? It's not so much about did I win or did I lose, right? So effort as being sort of an indicator of success. So what happens with a fixed mindset? So we talked about it being being defined as the viewing intelligence, skills, and abilities as fixed and unchanging. This leads to sort of a goal of proving that ability. So if it's about either I have it or I don't, then my efforts need to be proving that I do have it. And anything that sort of risks the possibility of sort of proving that I'm not good or I'm not skilled in this, right, is to be feared or sort of avoided, right? And the emphasis is placed on talent as an indicator of success. So again, I'm either good or I'm not, right? What this leads to is sort of this approach of failure being avoided at all costs, right? As sort of the worst case scenario. And an end in itself rather than being something to be learned from, right? And similarly, challenges, right? If I'm struggling with something, if I'm struggling with a skill, right? That's an indication that, oh no, like maybe I'm not good at this, versus, in the growth mindset being something that's necessary. So what happens in the growth mindset? So again, this views intelligence, skills, and abilities as being moldable, right? Something that we can develop and grow. The goal then, as a result of that, becomes learning and developing the ability through effort and deliberate practice, right? So we can actually grow those abilities. The emphasis, rather than on talent, as a key indicator of success, the emphasis is placed on effort. Did I give it my all? And what this does is it drives motivation and achievement. Because if now all of a sudden, right, I mentioned how the growth mindset is the power of not yet. If all of a sudden there's this opportunity for me to get good at something that maybe before I was like, I didn't realize that I could, right? I just assumed I wasn't good at this, right? Then all of a sudden it becomes motivating, right? I hear the fixed mindset so often around, math is a common one, how often do you hear people say, well, I'm not good at math? You know, I was having a conversation with a cousin actually on the weekend, and you know, she's at that age where she's graduated, and you know, a few years back, and so naturally to sort of put a little pressure on her, I'm like, oh, what are your plans, right? And you know, are you going to be going to school soon, or you know, are you thinking about going to school? And her response to me was, oh, you know what, like I was never good at school, right? So the implication being like, well, I'm probably not going to go to school. And so I asked her, just you know, the simple question. I was like, well, what does it take for someone to be good at school? Right? How do you get good at school? How do you get good at anything? Right? Really, it's just by doing it, and by you know practicing and learning the right ways to do whatever it is you're trying to learn to do. And so, and I found this even just you know in my adult years when I was first learning about the growth mindset, realizing that oh man, like I'm sort of stuck in this fixed mindset place, you know, in terms of my abilities. Once I started to learn about the growth mindset and try and apply it in my own life, it kind of just opened up the realm of opportunity, particularly within sport, right? Because I never considered myself to be athletic. And so I was sort of dabbling in running at the time. But then once I learned about this and learned like, no, if I do the right things and I apply effort, I can still improve even as an adult. And so that it kind of motivated me to see what I can do with it now, right, even as an adult. So I think that motivation piece is really important because how often is the challenge like I need to motivate my athletes or I need to motivate my teenager, and maybe part of the problem is the mindset that they're bringing or that's been cultivated in them around some of this stuff. So, you know, we had talked about failure. This is a quote that I think is pretty cool coming from Michael Jordan. To learn to succeed, you must also learn to fail. The key to success is failure, which can, you know, it sounds so counterintuitive to us, right? Unless, you know, if anyone else were saying it, be like, well, what are you talking about, right? Like, the key to success is success, right? But his point is how do you get there, right? When you look at the number of times that he failed, right, in order to get to the level that he got to, right? It's huge, right? And he's pretty clear about that. And so changing our mindset around, you know, and how we look at failure is important. So this is just a sort of, we talked about some of these peripheral things, right? Like confidence, passion, discipline, self-awareness, motivation, and mental skills, right? And obviously those are important pieces of the makings of a champion. But again, there's sort of that foundation that I'm sort of advocating for, I guess, is that if we were to look and sort of pick the brains of some of those champions, I think a lot of them would show indicators of what I'm talking about, this growth mindset and this approach to the challenges that they experience at their level that aids them as they deal with a lot of these challenges. So let's compare the two and look at the characteristics around each of them. So in the fixed mindset, so when you look at, okay, so here you have it. In terms of skills or abilities, I've mentioned you either have it or you don't. It leads to a desire to look smart or prove your ability. Effort is viewed as a waste of time or worse, right? Worse being it's an indicator of I don't have it, I'm not good at this thing. Challenges are to be avoided, or you know, as they sort of indicate that maybe I'm not as good at this thing as I thought. Feedback can often be ignored. You know, even if it's useful criticism, right? Because we don't want to. It's difficult in that place of fixed mindset to acknowledge that maybe I have something to learn, right? Or maybe I'm I haven't arrived yet. And often the success of others is threatening, right? Because there's this tendency to compare. We go to competition, and we're just looking, oh, I'm better than that person. I'm better than that person. We don't really want to pay attention to all the people that maybe are better than us, because that's sort of a threatening experience. And again, in the growth mindset, it's almost the exact opposite, right? Where we view skills and abilities as being we can develop them and they can be grown. It leads to a desire to learn and improve. Effort is viewed as a pathway to success. Challenges are embraced as we sort of fit them into their rightful place as being necessary, right? And as they're necessary, we want to grow. Bring it on, kind of idea. Feedback is seen as an opportunity to learn. And again, success of others, rather than being threatening, we look to find lessons, right, and inspiration from those that are better than us. So I had mentioned kind of the neurobiology, and again, I'm not going to get into too much detail. I don't know that I could necessarily get into a whole lot of detail. So I'm going to just kind of give the Coles notes around some of the research around neurobiology and how not just growth mindsets, but learning in general works, and how Carol Dweck, she did research around when you teach athletes, or when you teach students, that as they're learning, their brains are physically changing, that they're actually having an impact on the structure of their brain. Because for a long time, years ago, the belief was that your brain was just sort of a fixed structure, kind of like hardware. What you had when you were born was sort of what you grew up with, and you couldn't really do much about it. Sort of the saying, like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? But as technology developed, as the science developed, we started to learn that actually our brains are much more plastic, are much more moldable than we realized. That we can change the structure of our brain through things that we learn and through different behaviors. And so as we're learning something new, there's actually new pathways that are being formed. And so there's a reason when people try something new, they're not very good at it, right? And I often talk with my clients about that, where they're struggling with, like, I'm not good at this. Asking the question, like, well, how long have you been doing it? How long have you been trying this new skill? Like, well, not very long. Okay, well then that kind of fits, doesn't it? Right? Because it takes time for our brains to form the pathways that are required for that skill or that ability to just become natural, right? To become efficient and effective, and to be able to just do it quickly, time and time again. But having that knowledge that I can actually, through my actions, impact the structure of my brain, right, and make those skills easier, is an important point. And research, again, has shown that when athletes or when students know this, right, and they're taught this, it increases that motivation to try new things, right? Because they see it from that perspective, right? Like, I can actually influence change in my abilities. And an analogy for this is just if you're in a forest walking, right, and you just sort of turn and cut through the forest. No one had ever been there before, right? That path that you're making is going to be pretty difficult to go through. But the more that you go through that same path, right, and many of the paths that you go on, are often ones that hundreds and hundreds or thousands of people have walked on before, right? And it's just sort of worn down. that's sort of the same idea that we're talking about here when we talk about the brain, right? And sort of its ability to be molded. The more you do that, the more that pathway is created. Okay, so that's that. So cultivating a growth mindset. So when we talk about athletes, you know, one thing that I think really important, even when I was learning about this myself, I often talk about in terms like I'm a recovering fixed mindsetter. One of the first steps that I think we need to go through is we need to really check our self-talk, because that's going to be the best way to sort of determine, okay, where are my mindsets at? If whenever I approach a challenge, I'm really irritable or I'm really struggling or I feel like guilt or shame when I make a mistake, what are some of the things that I'm saying to myself in that moment about that struggle? Because that's going to sort of indicate, okay, if I'm saying these things, then is my mindset the growth mindset or is it the fixed mindset? Really, often we can sort of pick it out by how it makes us feel, right? If we feel really kind of crummy or if we feel shame about something, that's probably not the growth mindset, right? And we're probably approaching it a certain way. So we really need to check that self-talk and kind of be aware of it on a regular basis. Acknowledging and embracing imperfections and mistakes. This is easier said than done. Again, from experience, it's a challenge, right? But again, it's putting those things in their proper place, right? Realizing that as I make mistakes, I create opportunities to learn and to be better at whatever it is I'm doing. And trying to find examples in our lives where we have made mistakes and we've actually learned from them and become better as a result, right? So acknowledging and embracing imperfections and mistakes. Practice stepping out of your comfort zone, right? A good indication of where your mindset is at would be, okay, how often do you spend time in your comfort zone, right? If you're always sort of like, no, I'm not going to go first, right? I'm not going to take a risk, or I'll let these people do that. Then there's a good chance, again, that you're in that fixed mindset and not in the growth mindset. Whereas the growth mindset, it's like, yeah, it's uncomfortable. That's the whole point, right? But in order to learn, in order to grow, we need to be willing to take those risks, right? So, so practicing doing that on a regular basis. Focusing on the process, not the end result. This is a tough one, right? It's so easy to get caught up with that end result. Like, oh, I gotta get on the podium, or I gotta get first place, right? Like, if I do that, then it's gonna be like that's success, right? Again, being sort of having the challenge myself of shifting that mindset, right? I remember the very first time I entered the Manitoba half marathon, I'm like looking at the times and it's the whole point for me doing that was like, can I beat the fastest person, right? Obviously I couldn't, right, when I realized the time. And I was in this place of just being discouraged about that, which is ridiculous, right? Because obviously, it's my first time going into it. I don't have a lot of experience with running, and so why would I expect that I'm going to be sort of like the fastest person there? But that was just the result of kind of the mindset I was bringing to that. So rather than doing that, rather than focusing on the end result, we're focusing on that process, right? Focusing on putting in that effort, being patient with the process of what it takes, right, to get to a place where we perform well. It takes time, and so it's going to take a lot of patience. And I think this is an important one, right? Becoming a learner in whatever it is we're doing. So obviously in your sport, right? Just trying to learn as much as you can, asking for that feedback from coach, or just if you see someone who's better at something, going and asking them, hey, like I noticed you're really good at that. How can I do what you're doing, right? But also practicing that in other areas of your life as well, right? So if you're, maybe you're one of those people that's like, oh yeah, I'm just not good at math, or I'm not good at science, right? Again, that's partly checking that self-talk, right? Maybe tacking on, I'm not good at it yet, right? And then practicing, okay, how can I learn something here, right? Instead of just checking out from it, right? How can I become a learner? Now, in terms of coaches and parents, right? I think this is an important one too, because coaches and parents have a huge influence on, the development of athletes' mindsets, right? Like it's going to come from parents and coaches. So we often talk about praise, right? And I want to refer to it as sort of the power of deliberate praise and encouragement. So being intentional and sort of and choosing how we praise and encourage athletes carefully, because quite often we can sort of say, if you look down, I'll just skip over the praise for a second, but if you look at a boy, right, it's praising talent and intelligence. I'm going through this right now because I have an 18-month-old daughter, and of course I'm biased, and she's the smartest, little girl in the world, right? She's just brilliant. She's a genius, right? But knowing what I know about some of that stuff, knowing how important it is for me to sort of help her cultivate the right mindset as she grows, right? I'm trying to be intentional about the way that, as we're going like, where's your nose? Like, where's your ears, right? And she's just nailing on one after another, right? The tendency, it's so easy to be, wow, you're so smart, right? And on the surface, like, there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's like, oh, you're encouraging her. The danger of that, though, is, okay, when she does things right, I mean, she's 18 months old, so she's not, like, she just knows I'm happy with her, right? She doesn't know what I'm saying, but as she gets older and starts to understand the words, right? The danger is that it's like, okay, when I do something right, I'm smart. But what does that mean when I make a mistake or I do something wrong, right? And it's sort of this unintended consequence of our praise that's like, oh, you made a mistake. Well, I guess you're not smart, right? I'm not going to say that, obviously, right? But it's just sort of that, it's a natural consequence. So rather than doing that, right, you're praising the engagement in the process, right? So I've been sort of deliberately trying to focus on like, wow, you're learning so much. Again, she doesn't know what I'm saying, right? So it's more so for me getting that practice in now, but like praising the hard work, that they're displaying, or the strategies or the focus that they have, or just their ability to persevere, right? Just praising that process stuff. So saying, great job working so hard on whatever it is. Like I said, wow, you're learning so much. What did you learn from that mistake? So again, like helping them think about failure in a different way. And again, avoiding things like, wow, you're so smart, you're the best. She is so talented or gifted. And unfortunately, that's quite common when we're looking at, in media and things like that, right? It's often like, wow, they're just so talented, they're so amazing. We kind of give them like this godlike status, right, of, being extremely gifted. And I'm not saying that they're not talented. Talent certainly has a place. But they've worked to get there, right? And that's important, right? They've put in that effort to get to that level. Again, this is sort of the flip side rather than being positive. It's more like that shameful, like, why did you do that? Right? When they make a mistake, right? And really shaming them for the mistake that they made. Teaching them that, okay, mistakes are bad to be avoided sort of at all costs. continue on just a little bit with the coaches and parents. Encouraging athletes and children to try again, right? I think sometimes in our efforts to sort of encourage them to make their own decisions, right, and sort of enable them in that way. If something's hard, they just stop doing it, right? It's too hard, I don't want to do it. So encouraging them or pushing them to say, hey, you know what, like try again, like you can do this, right? And not just letting them try the same thing over and over, right? But actually guiding them in their efforts, right? So, okay, instead of trying that, why don't you try it this way, right? And helping them realize that as they try things, as they try new ways of doing things, right, they get better at it, whatever it is they're doing. The biggest one is embrace the growth mindset yourself. So learn more about the growth mindset, practice it in your own life, and lead by that example, right? I was recently just reading an article that just sort of examined literature on training coaches, right, and how coaches approach leadership, and it just found that coaches who led from the growth mindset approach of praising that effort and encouraging or not discouraging mistakes, but really just the process, found that their athletes perform better in the long run, right? Rather than coaches who just praise, the talented athlete on the team or just focused on talent. And so I think that's, the biggest way that you can influence your athletes or your children, right, is by practicing this stuff yourself, so that they see you as because it's one thing to say, like, it's okay to make mistakes, but if every time you make a mistake in front of them, you're kicking yourself, getting irritable, to the people around you, they're gonna follow what you do, right, and sort of do that themselves. So, so leading by example. So kind of the key takeaways from this evening that I'm hoping you get from my talk. For starters, like I said, our mindset always influence our performance, for better or worse. So we need to be aware of what our mindsets are. Mindsets have the capacity to fuel or sabotage our performance. The growth mindset, the belief that our abilities can be molded over time with effort and deliberate practice. Deliberate practice and effort equals more efficient neural pathways, so that was the neurobiology part. And shifting to a growth mindset requires intentionality. I don't think anyone is one or the other at all times, right? I think it's an ongoing process, just like any challenge. But it's something that we can get better at, and we can develop the ability to become more growth-minded. And but we got to be intentional about it. Otherwise, we're just going to fall into those same patterns. So that's kind of all I have on that for now. Are there any questions about the talk or about growth mindsets in general? Anything that was maybe unclear or clarified? I'll do my best to answer them.
What are some more examples of struggling to get people into a growth mindset? Examples or...
Yeah, okay, so struggling to get people into the growth mindset. I think one of the, if we look at it from just sort of that neurobiology perspective, right? When we talk about habits, right, we often talk about it in terms of breaking the habit. But one of the things that we found when we're looking at neural pathways is that once they're established, those are permanent pathways that we form, right? So it's not so much about breaking that pathway or breaking that habit. We have to actually learn new habits, right? Until they become And so until they become stronger than that old habit, right, that, it's gonna always sort of be a struggle, right? And so that old habit, it might still be there in terms of like a pathway, but it'll be like, there'll be overgrowth on it and, or whatever, right? The forest analogy, but I think that's sort of a big challenge in terms of how we think about it. It takes effort, right? Especially, even just what I've found in working with clients is that self-talk piece, right? It's the initial, like, when we're in that place of feeling really discouraged, it can be really hard for us to do the work of, like, what's going on right now, right? Like, what are you thinking right now? Because the last thing we want to do is think about it some more, right? So but I think it's important to, maybe when we're not in that place, but afterwards, when we're sort of analyzing kind of, what was going on yesterday when I was in that dark place or difficult place, taking some time to even write down, like, these are some of the thoughts that I was having, or some of the things that I was saying to myself at the time, so that we can begin to create awareness, right? That's really that first step, is creating awareness.
Are there any tools that are out there for,
Like his goals are sort of the thing that kind of drive the growth mindset is what I'm understanding. So to develop the goals well so that you sort of know where you're heading, so that you actually have a light at the end of the tunnel and then you're in the long term sort of.
Yeah, do you mean goals in general or goals related?
Or like related to specific sports or things like that, you work under a goal sort of oriented.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I know when we're talking about goals, like, there's the acronym having a SMART goal, right? Where, I'll see if I can remember all of them, but S being sort of like having a specific goal that's measurable. So that's the M part. It's achievable. And R is different depending on realistic, and then time-based, right? So just having the goal of like, oh, I want to lose weight, right? You probably hear a lot of that around New Year's, right? A lot of New Year's resolutions. The problem with that is it's so general and so, it's not very clear, right? But if you were to say, I want to lose 10 pounds by such and such a date, right? All of a sudden, there's a way to measure whether or not we've reached that goal, right? So I think when we're talking about goals, right, we need to be as specific as possible about them and kind of create a plan for, okay, how are we gonna get there? Does that answer your question around that?
I was just wondering if there are specific tools that you use for different people with different types of, like, is there actually people develop tools that are out there? For hockey, this would be your, sort of how to develop your goals. It asks you very specific questions, let's say, what your goals are, or maybe it's a business or something else, like, where tools have been developed. I don't know.
Yeah, nothing's come to mind in terms of specific sports and stuff like that, or specific domains, but
Just based on my limited experience with it, some of the change starts when you change the environment, the culture, from a tell to a questioning environment. Where in a telling environment, there are no mistakes. Everything's either right or wrong, so there's no freedom to make those mistakes.
okay.
If you take a look at teaching games for understanding mindset, that's all about mistakes. Go make 100, make another 100, but at some point quit making the same one. Right. So part of that to maybe answer that question might be is that part of it is just the way you do business. All right. How do you encourage people to try things and fail, and then encourage them to try again? Right. Versus just constantly telling and tell.
Oh yeah.
And then when I just tell, if you don't do what I tell, then you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I stop.
Yeah, and really letting them sort of be an active participant in that journey versus sort of like,
It's got to be us. It's got to be us. right? It can't be me expecting you to do stuff. Like, I gotta put out the challenge and say, go ahead, have a go at it.
Yeah.
Nice idea. Did it work? No?
Right.
Okay, what else could you do?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, and it comes from a kind of a teaching games for understanding,
Oh,
tactical games mindset, that you have to just approach it a little differently. You can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different answer. I think Einstein said that's the definition of insanity.
right. Yeah. Well, and that's the advantage of having, a coach or someone with sort of more expertise in that area, right? Is you can make that mistake and hope that they will they'll allow that to happen, like you're saying, but they'll also guide you in, okay, you made that mistake, now try this, right? Or try it a little differently and see what happens, right? But sort of guiding you along, but also letting you do your thing.
There's
You
a
make
lot
it
of,
happen.
there's a lot of great little videos on YouTube that teach all the pieces of this, like about 4-minute
Oh, yeah.
videos that help to get different points across.
Yeah.
And like there's lessons online how to teach the growth mindset.
Yeah.
And everything. Like, I mean, if we use it in our school with our kids.
Yeah.
It's easily available.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. It just reinforces everything that you are mentioning to us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's become she's been researching it for quite a few years, and I think I definitely noticed it, especially in the last, since I've been kind of aware of it in the last 5 years, it's become very popular.
There's a Canadian sports psychologist, Wally Isdell, where he's teaching down in the States.
Yeah.
He was at Union College. Like 5 years ago, they won the NC2A hockey championship. Their enrollment's 2,500. They played the final game against University of Minnesota, whose enrollment 65,000, and they beat them. And the sports psychology piece he gave was, teach the growth mindset, deliberate practice, and focus on process versus outcomes. Same things you said. And those guys, I mean, they're great the way they. And there was a couple Manitobans on that team too.
We came across a website called traininghockey.com, and it looks a lot at growth and fixed. It kind of applies, and it's got videos kind of in a package. Coming at it from a coaching perspective, I'd love to develop like a package of lessons that we use throughout the season. So
Yeah.
like maybe once a week.
Yeah, and having it, I think that's a good point, right? Having it sort of like not just a one-off talk about the growth mindset or whatever.
And like teacher stores have books on how to teach the lessons.
Yeah.
It's online, like pull up pieces of that and apply it.
But do you have resources that or authors that you would recommend?
There's a book in Rollins, or there was one at Rollins, now I can't remember what it is. It's and there's lots online. You just pick out the pieces you want for teaching. Like I use Google lessons on growth mindset or how to teach a growth mindset. It's all there.
Have you read the book by Carol Black?
Yeah,
Yeah.
audiobook.
Oh yeah.
When I'm up to it, going back and forth to work, I'll listen to it. Yeah, that seemed like a good start.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's just the how. The what is easy. The how to implement is the hard part, and it's getting someone who's 12 or 13 years old to think that sitting in a classroom and thinking about my thinking is actually going to.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not easy.
That Wally Isdell guy or whatever.
How do you say it? How do you spell last name?
Isdell, B-Y-Z. I don't even know if there's a vowel in it other than the Y, much else. He's from BC originally, but he's at Union College. If you just Google Union College hockey sports psychology, you'll get this guy, and you can get a hold of him, and he's done all kinds of real cool things.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like the how, right? That is the challenge, right? Especially, it's one thing talking, to like a lot of my work is with adults, right? Conceptually, like, it makes sense, but again, right? Like, I think that piece of leading from that place, right? And sort of how we communicate certain things to athletes, right? Around, the mistakes, failures.
Well, and adolescent is so fixed. It's and so is our society is so fixed. Right? If you're not going to win, there's not much point playing. Or if a team's in a championship, right? You just get those messages over and over and over.
we're looking at trying to get kind of a mental skills workbook going for potential athletes next season. I mean, this would be incorporated into it where exercises, whether it's self-talk or where my kind of ABCs going into practice, where I want to focus at long-term goals and kind of talk about process stuff. So kind of working with community to kind of develop some exercises so that it's not always lectures, it's an interaction, and they can see the athletes kind of they can kind of have some stuff to talk about it.
So who's developing that?
Pardon?
Who's developing that program?
It'll be Kevin Page, kind of with our performance there as part of our program. Kind of this year, we kind of introduced our mental skills and had some kind of team talks. And going into next year, we want to get more into the kind of one-on-one and semi-private stuff and a lot more sharing and stuff. So that's kind of.
So is that available to look at?
Not yet. First it's kind of our summer.
This has kind of been the first sort of, it's like been a trial run right this year, sort of see, getting the word out there that it's an option for teams, right? The mental skills piece and seeing what kind of interest there is. So
we kind of almost like office hours where we tried to kind of pull some athletes out of training and kind of, but I think they need kind of a workbook and some time to kind of think about this stuff and process it, almost like homework, but it's fun homework.
well, yeah, and I mean the real challenge is sort of like it's easy to sort of explain how strength training is important or practice is important, right? But when it comes to the mental skill stuff, it can often just sort of fall, even in adults, right? It can fall to sort of the wayside of like, whatever, right? And so we're still at this point of like reinforcing how important it actually is, right? And being sort of a pillar that fits in with sort of these other important pieces as well. So I think that's a real challenge. Anything else? Any thoughts? Okay, well, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for your input. I really appreciate it.